Okay. So my name is Katherine. Most people call me Kat. I spent over 25 years in Florida and California. I moved there when I was about 15. I came back here in about 2015 to see my brother, who I hadn't seen in over 20 years. And I had the opportunity to, even at my age, go back to school and get my degree, which I did in business accounting, but then life takes you down different paths. And I decided the best way to spend the rest of my life was to share my story and try to help others. So I went into mental health and addiction, which I will be graduating in August. And I'm just hoping, I have a special needs son. We were also had a lot of opportunities for him here. And now I'm just focusing on my future and using my past to help as many people as I can.
Kat, you mentioned your story. Sorry, Gwen.
Okay.
You mentioned you have a story to share and your past. Can you elaborate a little bit for the listeners, the viewers, what it is that you're looking to share today?
Well, I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. I never received help for it. It went on for a few years. That's when I was about 15. I moved to Florida, where I dealt with a lot of racism, something I'd never dealt with before. And I had my books burned and death threats carved in my desk. And it was, it just was really bad. And then we moved to a place called Bradenton, Sarasota. My stepfather couldn't find work as a boat salesman, which is why we left Canada. We had a big marina and restaurant called Sturgeon Lake Marina, and we had a fire and we lost everything. And he couldn't find work selling boats. So that's why we moved to Florida. And there is where, I just, I started experimenting with drugs. Over the course of my, like the next, well, when I was 16, I was raped by the man across the street. He just walked into our home, and it was the first of many traumatic experiences from then on. That's when I turned to drugs. I became very promiscuous, as much as I hated sex. I was always just looking for, we'd walk down the beach and you'd see all these couples holding hands and kissing, and that's all I ever wanted. And I never had that. I was so childlike because I didn't have a childhood. I remained a child even into my adult years for a long time. And I was just used by men. They could see me a mile away. I ended up getting really bad in drugs. I had my children. I got married 3 times, divorced. Over the course of that time, I'd been raped a few times. And that's when I went into a psychiatric, like a mental hospital, trying to get help, but didn't work. People, like I said, it's very hard to find help, but it is out there. And then I had my son, my other son, and he was left in the care of family members. And I moved back to Canada to get help from my dad and stepmom, and that didn't really work. I ended up leaving. I got worse into drugs. I'd been raped a couple more times during that time. And then I met a man, an older man that took me in because I was living on the streets, and he gave me a place to live. He gave me food. He bought me clothes. He was like the father. He was like a father to me until the first time, in repayment for his kindness, he sold me for the first time. I also want to make it very clear that a lot of people like, well, why didn't you leave? You know, I mean, you were an adult. It's different when you're a kid, but now that you're an adult, you know, when you spend your entire life being abused and raped and neglected and not having anyone care or support about you, you know, that it becomes a way of life to you. And like the man that trafficked me was very well known. He was very prestigious in the community. Um, he also had an incredibly violent side, and he is not somebody that you say no to. Um, I want to be careful what I say in here, but he's, I even at one point had a hit put out on me, which actually was the one thing that saved my life, because it was the one thing that I was able to escape where I was. And I didn't tell anybody. I just ran away and started over. I don't know if you could really say starting over, because my drug addiction got worse and worse. And then eventually I had my son, and that's what forced me to get off drugs and try to turn my life around.
Wow.
What
Wow.
resources were available to you at that time? Did you seek out a women's shelter, or what was available to you to help you get off of the drugs? It's not an easy thing to do.
Well, I went on methadone, and I was, after I had my son, you know, he was in NICU for a while because he did have some withdrawals from the methadone, but he overcame it very quickly, and he was incredibly healthy, and things were going really well for us. And I had saved up enough money to finally go back home to Florida, to where my other children are. And I was just waiting on his passport, and the person that I was staying with ended up, all my stuff got stolen. My methadone got stolen. My money got stolen. So we ended up, the two of us, living in my van. And I didn't know anything about shelters. I thought if I took my son to shelter that he'd be taken from me. Mm-hmm. And I was terrified of that. Like, he was all I had in the world, you know? So he ended up getting taken from me. A bunch of people called in on me, and he was taken, and I had to fight to get him back. And I'd never fought for anything in my entire life. So let me tell you, the shelter I went to were wonderful. They really did help me. They're the only people in my entire life that really cared about trying to help me. But initially it was like, I had to do everything on my own. I had to get clean and, you know, get a job and go into counseling, go to NA meetings, get a place of my own. And just, even the couple of friends that I cared about in that life, I hated leaving them, but I had to cut all ties for my son's sake. And it was, we finally did make it home, but then things kind of took a bad turn again. And that's when I ended up coming back here in 2015 and working very hard, go back to school, get a job, get our own place, and worked on my book. And here we are.
Wow.
Where do you think you got that strength? Like, not everybody has that strength. I don't know, is that something within you that you always had, or just all the obstacles that you confronted gave you this?
I have two older daughters, and we don't have a very good relationship. I haven't spoken to them in a while. And they were told a lot of things about me from family members. A lot of things that were true, but a lot of things that weren't true. And it definitely put a strain on our relationship. And before I had my son, here, I tried, but without them, I didn't have them with me. They were taken from me. Like I was forced to leave, and I didn't, and then eventually sorry. Eventually I wasn't able to call them anymore. And I felt like I had nothing to live for, because my children, they have all I ever wanted since I was a little girl. And although I was really screwed up for a long time, I was a good mother, and I loved my girls. So I think with the only reason why I was able to fight so hard with Aislinn is because I physically had him here with me. You know, he needed me. I was all he had in the world. So him and getting home to his sisters were the only thing that mattered to me. So having him with me is definitely where, without them, I wouldn't be here.
Wow. Thanks for, sharing your personal experience, up to date. And I kind of wanted to circle back a little while ago, because you had mentioned you were back in school, and that's been a goal of yours. And you had mentioned, I think, mental health and addictions. Do you want to touch on, maybe why you took that course and how it's been? And I think you mentioned you were coming up to graduating as well, and what that's going to mean for the future. Where do you hope to see that taking you?
So when I graduated business accounting, I was having a really hard time finding work, because I really did struggle to get through that course, even though I graduated. But then I happened to write a letter to an actor who I had looked up to my entire life. He was, I can't even put into words how much of an impact that he had on my life. And all I did was write him a letter and thanked him. And he's also has a comic book company. And so I knew if I sent it there that he would get it personally, which he did. I never, ever thought in a million years I'd ever get a reply, but I did. And he told me how much it meant to him to write that letter. And I mentioned to him that about my story, and he said that, writing a book would be a way to help people, to give back. And that's when, because I had thought about writing a book over the years, and it was then that it really got put into my head. And then I was like, what can I do aside from writing this book, and hopefully one day to get it published, that I could do to help people. And then I heard about mental health and addiction, and I started going into that course. And for a while, it became really bad for a while, very dark for a while, because writing that book was the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. It not only made me remember a lot of things, that I had to, recall moments that I have tried to bury deep for a long time, but it also forced me to remember things that I hadn't remembered since I was a little girl. And a lot of it was almost like reliving it. It was like being re-traumatized all over again. And I went to a very, very dark place. And this was when COVID first hit. And we were even more isolated than ever. And I started having suicidal thoughts again. So I went and tried to get help. And there was one woman, a nurse practitioner, who became like a lifeline for me. And she helped me immensely. And the more I got into the mental health and addiction, the more I learned about my PTSD and anxiety disorders. I learned more about my son's disorder. He's severe ADHD with learning disabilities and behavioral problems. And the more I researched the more it helped me to understand myself and what I had been through. And mainly that I had tried to reach out and I tried to get help, and I didn't have support from family. And that's hard for me to say, but that's the truth of the matter. I went through everything alone. And I don't want other women to have to go through what I went through and try to reach out. Because reaching out, I used to think that that was a cowardly thing to do, because I was always made to believe that you suck it up, you don't cry, you deal with stuff, you got to be strong. Mm-hmm. And that's where I got my nickname Mama Bear. So I felt very much ashamed in doing that. And then I realized that asking for help is courageous, because you have to love yourself enough to want to be helped, and we deserve to be helped. And like, sex trafficking has such a stigma on it. Like, it is not just about children getting stolen and sold to sex trafficking. A lot of people believe that that's what it is, and it's not. I mean, even women who prostitute, that's sex trafficking. And a lot of these, whether you're forced into it or you're guilted into it, or you just, it's sometimes your only choice, it's still all, these women deserve to be helped. And I want to be able to share my story, because it is not talked about enough. The sex trafficking, sexual violence, it is not talked about enough. And it's become so normalized that people like, oh, you were raped? Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Like, that blows my mind that it's not something that, like, COVID is, I believe mental health and sexual violence are one of the most, they're one of the worst viruses ever known to man. I think, personally, I think it is not getting enough. These people aren't getting enough help, and that's obvious, because most people don't come forward because they feel so ashamed. I guess what I'm trying to say is, writing this book and sharing my story, I just want to make other people know that they don't have to be ashamed, that it is possible to get away, that there is hope, that there are many of us that do understand what they are going through, and we want to help. We want them to reach out, that they deserve to. Like, I went through this for 35 years. I thought it was too late for me. It's never too late. I don't care if you're 67 years old. It's never too late to get help, and it's never too late to have the life that you want and you deserve.
Kudos to you for everything you've accomplished. Congratulations.
Yes. Yes. And I know you had mentioned this book was really tough for you to write, and it took you to a dark place. Would you also say writing the book had any therapeutic components to help you
Huge
along your journey?
Huge. My writing that book and taking mental health and addiction were, and aside from my children, were probably the best things that I have ever done. That helped me more than counseling or medication or anything that I've tried to do. That there's no words to express how much that book and writing it helped me.
Wow.
Amazing.
Yep.
So I have a question. I mean, I'm still in shock and awe here about your story. It's so much to take in. But I mean, here in Northern Ontario, and I can visualize the, where do you turn? Who do you help? Is there a guidance that now that you've lived this experience, if somebody out there is watching this, if there's one thing you could say to them, to look for help, where would their starting point be?
Mhm.
I would say go to any health clinic, because they're the one place that can set you up on the right track to counseling. Even if you have a community counseling center in your town, like government assistance, if you're on government assistance especially, and anybody can go on it. That's how I started. I went on government assistance. I got free counseling. You get help set up in your own place. If you have an addiction, which I would say like 90% of people who are raped or trafficked, or suffered any kind of abuse, they turn to addiction. That's how we numb it. That's how we get through. A lot of people think methadone is a bad thing. It actually saved my life. It saved my son's life. And I do not regret ever doing it. That's the start, because a lot of these people, they don't know how to get help because they think, well, I got to have my fix. If I go in, I have to be able to be okay, because a lot of the people, they don't even get high anymore. They just use to feel normal. And that's the first thing, to either go on methadone, or go, if you think that you can handle going into a rehab, then do it. It's hard, but once you do it, you will be so proud of yourself, and you deserve to have the life that you do not think that you can have, and you can. So go on methadone, go to a clinic, get on government assistance. They are there to help you.
And I think a lot of businesses also today have like EAP, or if they're, within an organization, because it's all walks of life, right? It's not just directed to a specific demographic. That being noted, then I'm sure there are programs out there, even in work environments, that might support and help, like Lisette mentioned, what those next steps may be.
The other place that I would definitely go to is, and it might even be the first step, is call the sexual violence hotlines, because some of these organizations, that's what they do. So it doesn't matter if you're an addict, or if you're a prostitute, or you were raped, or even if you were just abused as a child and you're an adult now. That's what these organizations do, and they can set you up with the right kind of people that can and will help you.
Kat, like, when you think, if you're a mother or father out there somewhere and you're wondering what's going on in your girl's life, what are some of the warning signs of someone being trafficked? Like, sure, we always think it's the runaway, but is there, like, what do you see? What should you be looking out for?
Definitely behavioral issues. Like for me, when as a child, the first things I was doing was, I was dressing up very provocative. Like I was in love with Madonna, so I would dress like her, like big time. A lot of people, or children, or women, whoever become, when they're being abused, they will either veer away from affection, and like they'll jerk, or they'll like, you'll know that they're scared, or they'll be overly sexual, even a child. Hiding in their room a lot is a big one. Check for if they're doing drugs, and you can tell just by looking at their eyes. But most of the time, it's isolation and not wanting to be a social at all.
Mm,
Cutting is another one.
Yeah.
Cutting themselves is a big one.
no, we
I've got-
definitely, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No,
No,
No, I was just gonna
I
say
didn't
I-
have really much valuable. I was just touching on mental health. So you go ahead.
no, cutting was a big one for me. And then like everything, I did anything and everything to try to get attention.
Mm,
And it just, I was in the wrong family for that, unfortunately.
Yeah. It's
oh boy.
yeah,
Um,
it's a lot to think about, for a family, and you love your kid, and you think, okay, you send them out into the world, and it's a scary place sometimes, and you try to protect them, but peer influence is huge too. It's a big battle sometimes.
The other thing I would like to tell parents is, even if you're not sure, take whatever steps you need to. My first, very first time I was sexually abused, nothing was done about it. It was kind of forgotten, but never for me. And if you have a child that you even think is being abused, you need to do whatever is necessary to assure them that you are a safe place for them to come to, that they are not going to get in trouble. They didn't do anything wrong. Call the authorities, call whoever you have to, because what you do in that moment is going to affect that child. Like, I didn't think that, even though I felt dirty and ashamed and it traumatized me, I felt like it was normal, or I deserved it, because nobody did anything. And the more it happened, I stopped telling people, because it didn't matter. Or I was lying or seeking attention, or it was just, it's important as a parent or a guardian, your actions when especially if they come to you, your initial reaction is what is going to make the difference. So please make it the right one.
Wow, that's powerful.
yes, thank you, Kat, for sharing that. And I'm keeping an eye on time here to try to stay within the time frame. I wanted to ask you one other quick question, because you've mentioned your book. What's the name of your book?
I've been struggling with that, but I've definitely come on my journey home,
Okay.
because
Nice.
it's been a very, very long journey, and home being within myself, my journey home to finally being my authentic self.
I think that's a beautiful name.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, you've shared your story. We all want to thank you so much for sharing what's happened to you, sharing your words of wisdom for those that may be going through the similar circumstances you went through. We're going to be looking out for your book. Definitely think you went through some barriers and challenges, but you've taken control. And you're going to take that control and your wisdom and now your education that you've went back to school for, and hopefully be able to help so many others. And I think all of us here can agree you have a bright future ahead of you as you help lots of other people and help our community age in action. Thank you so much for coming on, sharing your story. We really do appreciate it.
Oh no, I'm so grateful for you allowing me to be here to share my story. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Kat.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Kat.
Kat.